Okay, so several months ago I did a presentation on what my understanding of the Messiah was, the pre-incarnate Yeshua, and I associated that with this angel of Yahuwah that was what we think of, like in the Old Testament and the Tanakh, when we see Yahuwah interacting with mankind, I theorized that that was actually the Messiah. And so something that this is a presentation I've been working off and on for a while now, and it kind of correlates with that. And it's about this doctrine of the standing one, which is mentioned in the Nazarene Acts as another name for Messiah. So Book 1, Chapter 72, this is where Qomah is sent by James to Caesarea, and he's relating this story to Clement, and Qomah tells Clement, he says, Yaakov the Mavacher sent for me and sent me here to Caesarea, saying that Zacchaeus, had written to him from Caesarea that one Shimon, a Samaritan magician, was subverting many of our people, asserting that he was the standing one, that is, in other words, the Mashiach, and the great power of El Elyon. And Qomah also mentions this in Book 2. He says that Simon's father was Antigonus and his mother Rachel. He was a Samaritan from the village of the Getones, a magician exceedingly well trained in Greek literature, desirous of glory and boasting above all the human race. Oh, that's interesting. He was boasting a lot. We ever heard that before? So that he wishes himself to be believed to be an exalted power which is above Yahuwah the Creator, and to be thought to be Mashiach, and to be called the Standing One. Okay, so what is this Standing One doctrine? When I got to looking into this concept of the Standing One, I believe it's mentioned a couple of times by Epiphanius, where he describes, he's speaking about the Osaneans, or the doers. He says that he, I believe that's El Chai that he's speaking about, he describes Christ as a kind of power, and even gives his dimension, his length of 24 skoa, or 96 miles, his width of 24 miles, or 6 skoa, and similar prodigies about his thickness and feet, and other stories. So essentially this standing one is believed to be this gigantic angel. In the description by Epiphanius, he's 96 miles tall. He also describes the same concept again when he's in chapter 30, when he's speaking against the Ebionites. Pretty much the same description. So this appears to be related to this standing one doctrine. And so as I was researching this, I ran across this prayer, and it's an ancient Jewish prayer that speaks about, it actually mentions the name of Yeshua. And I'd heard this before, and I thought that it said that Yeshua was standing before the Holy of Holies in heaven. But so when I pulled it up and actually looked at it, the name of the prayer is the Sar HaPanim Prayer, or the Prince of the Face. And it says, "May it be your will that the sounding of the shofar, which we have done, will be embroidered in the veil by the appointed angel, as you accepted it by Elijah of blessed memory, and by Yeshua, the Prince of the Face." Now this is a Jewish Siddur. This is not Messianic Jewish. This is not some Ebionite doctrine. But it actually names Yeshua as the Prince of the Face, and the one who sits on Elohim's throne. May you be filled with compassion toward us, deserving of praise are you, Yahuwah of compassion. And so I got to look into this a little bit further, and there's another version of this prayer that's in an Orthodox Machzor that was discovered in Poland, and it probably dates from the 1800s, but it says, "May it be your will that the sounding of the tashrat," tashrat is the different tones that they play on the shofar, "that the tashrat that we blow may be woven into the curtain by the hand of the minister, Tartiel, like the name that was received by the hand of Elijah, his memory be for a blessing, and Yeshua, the Prince of the Face, and the Prince Metatron." Now, I'm not really familiar with Metatron. I do know it's some kind of Kabbalistic understanding of the angel of Yahuwah. But I found it interesting that according to this Jewish prayer book, Yeshua is another name for Metatron. And it says, "And may you be filled with mercy for us, blessed are you, Master of mercies." And I've actually got here on the screen, you can see an actual screenshot of the Machzor that has the name of Yeshua in it. So I began to look for this Sar HaPanim because I kind of found this interesting. And so at this website written by a Rabbi David Cooper, he says that Metatron, or the Prince of the Presence, the Sar HaPanim, is the greatest, largest, and most important of all angels, second only to the presence itself, and sometimes even confused with Yahuwah. Now, what does that sound like? That kind of sounds like what I was describing with the two Yahuwahs. The source of being, some Jewish mystics refer to the Sar HaPanim as the little Yahuwah, which is only one step under Elohim, so to speak. An earlier name for this angel was Yoel, or Yaoel, which translates as either the breath of El or the El-faced presence of Elohim. In other words, Metatron is in many ways a greater presence than all the archangels combined. So there is a connection here, and I'm not by any means promoting Jewish mysticism. I'm just trying to make a connection that maybe there was an ancient understanding of this. And then I found this other work. The name of it is Shi'ur Qomah, or Measure of the Body. And in that, Rabbi Yishmael says that Metatron, the great Lord, said to me, I bear his testimony on behalf of the Master Yahuwah, Elohim of Israel, the living and enduring Elohim, our Lord and Master, that his height from the seat of glory and up is 118,000 parasangs, and from the seat of glory down is 118,000 parasangs, and his total height is 236,000 parasangs. So you got this other gigantic angel being described, who is, according to this work, Metatron, is much larger than 96 miles. But there is a similar concept to this tremendously humongous angel. And Rabbi Ishmael is actually the name of the author of the book of 3rd Enoch, which also speaks about Metatron. So I think there's an interesting study to be done on 3rd Enoch for anyone that has the time, because there's a lot of similarities between, and I've just read through it briefly, but there is a lot of similarities between Metatron and the way that Yeshua is described in the book of Revelation. For instance, in Revelation 4, it has 24 elders coming before Yeshua, falling on their faces and casting their thrones at his feet. Well, in 3rd Enoch, there's 24 archangels that come before Metatron and throw their crowns at his feet. It's the same thing, 24 of these angelic beings casting their crowns at the feet of Yeshua and or Metatron. So all that being said, to just kind of lay a foundation, is what is the standing one doctrine? Where does it come from? And is it connected to the angel of Yahuwah in the scriptures? So one thing I've talked about before is this concept of righteousness and justice. And so the Messiah, and likewise the standing one, would have been closely associated with acts of righteousness. Righteousness and justice, or Zedekah Mishpat, are a Hindayatus in the ancient Near East. Essentially, it's two words that when they're put together, they mean one central concept. And so righteousness and justice, when used together, should be understood to represent a divine ideal of establishing social and economic equity in the human realm. So this usually entails punishing the oppressor and freeing or relieving the oppressed. So if we were to see this standing one doctrine in action, we would think that it would be associated with this type of concept of giving relief to the oppressed and punishing the oppressor. We also see this concept of righteousness and justice in Abraham's calling in Genesis 18, where Yahuwah says, I have known him, Abraham, so that he commands his children and his household after him to guard the way of Yahuwah, to do righteousness and justice, so that Yahuwah brings to Abraham what he has spoken to him. And immediately after this, the two men turn away and go towards Sodom, and Yahuwah stood before Abraham. And so, I found this interesting that it mentioned Yahuwah standing. And it says, Abraham drew near and said, would you also destroy the righteous with the wrong? Suppose there are 50 righteous in the city. And so then Abraham goes into this debate, basically, back and forth with Yahuwah. Now, Yahuwah had just made this statement that the reason he had chosen Abraham was because he teaches his posterity about righteousness and justice. And here you have Abraham standing before the Master of the universe, standing before Yahuwah, and he is basically debating Yahuwah on this justice and righteousness type of ideal, because he's saying, look, would you go punish the righteous with the wicked? Which is actually the opposite of righteousness and justice. And when you're practicing righteousness and justice, you should be relieving the righteous. You should be protecting the righteous, not destroying them with the wicked. And so we know how this conversation turns out, where Abraham convinces Yahuwah to preserve the city if he can find just 10 righteous men there. But what ends up happening, of course, is that Yahuwah brings out the righteous people and then destroys the city because he can't find the 10 men. Genesis 28, Jacob's ladder, we see that when Jacob was sleeping, he dreamed and saw a ladder upon the earth, and its top reached the heavens, and he saw messengers of Elohim going up and down on it. And see, Yahuwah stood above it and said, I am Yahuwah, the Elohim of Abraham, your father, and the Elohim of Yitzhak, the land on which you're lying, I give it to you and your seed. So Yahuwah is pictured as standing, and I would put forth my own understanding, which is that it wasn't actually Yahuwah, but it was the angel of Yahuwah, the Son. Exodus 14, and the messenger of Elohim who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the column of cloud went before them and stood behind them. So you see again, the angel of Yahuwah, of course, is in this cloud, and the cloud is mentioned as standing. And so it came before the camp of the Mitzrites and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud and the darkness, and it gave light by night, and the one did not come near the other all night. In Judges chapter 2, we see that the messenger of Yahuwah comes up from Gilgal to Bochim and says, I led you up from Mitzrayim and brought you to the land which I swore to your fathers, and said, I do not break my covenant with you. So it appears that the angel of Yahuwah is the one who actually made the covenant. It was the angel of Yahuwah who led them out of Mitzrayim, the same angel that was standing in the cloud. It says, as for you, do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land, break down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? Therefore I also said, I'm not driving them out before you. They shall be adversaries to you, and their mighty ones shall be a snare to you. And it came to be, when the messenger of Yahuwah spoke these words, all the children of Israel lifted up their voices and wept. So they called the name of the place Bochim, and slaughtered there to Yahuwah. So again, this angel of Yahuwah is the one that's leading them out. Exodus 23 says, see, I'm sending a messenger before you to guard you in the way, to bring you into the place I've prepared. Be on guard before him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he's not going to pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. Exodus 32 says, and now go, lead the people to the place where I have spoken to you. See, my messenger goes before you, and in the day of my visitation I shall visit their sin upon them. And Yahuwah plagued the people because they made the calf which Aharon had made. So the one other instance where we really see the messenger of Yahuwah spoke about extensively is in this confrontation with Balaam. And as I was reading through this, I was amazed at how many times it mentioned that this angel was standing. So, Numbers 22 says, "But the displeasure of Elohim burned because Balaam went, and the messenger of Yeshua stood in the way as an adversary against him. And the donkey saw the messenger of Yeshua standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and the donkey turned aside out of the way and went to the field. So Balaam beat the donkey to turn her back onto the way. Then the messenger of Yeshua stood in a narrow passage between the vineyards. And when the donkey saw the messenger of Yeshua, she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall, so that he beat her again. And the messenger of Yeshua went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn aside right or left. Then Yeshua opened Balaam's eyes. He saw the messenger of Yeshua standing in the way. The messenger said to him, Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? See, I have come out to stand against you. And Balaam said to the messenger, I have sinned, for I did not know you stood in the way. So it's like 7 or 8 times it's mentioned specifically that this angel was standing there and preventing Balaam. And also in Joshua it says, And it came to be when Yehoshua was by Jericho that he lifted his eyes and looked and saw a man standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Yehoshua went to him and said, Are you for us or our adversaries? And he said, No, for I have now come as captain of the host of Yahuwah. So again, you have this angelic person whom I believe to be this angel of Yahuwah mentioned and connected with standing. Yehoshua fell on his face to the earth, did obeisance, and said to him, What is my master saying to his servant? And the captain of the host of Yahuwah said to Yehoshua, Take your sandal off your feet, for this place in which you stand is set apart. And Yehoshua did so. So again, it's like a redux of the burning bush incident, where the now Moses-like character is being told to take his sandals off his feet. So, how is this connected to Messiah? Well, it says in Isaiah 11, In that day the root of Jesse will stand as a banner to the people, and nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious. Micah 5 says, But you, Bethlehem Ephrath, you who are little among the clans of Yehudah, out of you shall come forth to me the one to become ruler in Israel. His coming forth are from old, from everlasting, and he shall stand and shepherd his people in the strength of Yahuwah, in the excellency of the name of Yahuwah is Elohim, and he shall dwell for all that time. He shall be great to the ends of the earth. So we see this repetitive mention of standing with regards to the angel, with regards to him appearing to the patriarchs, and of course, the actions that the angels are undertaking is to free the Israelite people and to bring them to their own land, which follows through with the justice and righteousness, with the relieving the oppressed, with the declaration of liberty. So going back to the understanding that the Ebionites had, in Hippolytus' refutation of all heresies, it says that the Ebionites live comfortably to the customs of the Jews, alleging that they are justified according to the law, and saying that Yeshua was justified by fulfilling the law. And the Ebionites allege that they themselves also, when in like manner they fulfill the law, are able to become Christs or Messiahs. So, of course, you would not become the Messiah, the angel of Yahuwah, but you would become like a shadow picture of Messiah. This is mentioned in the Nazarene Acts, where it says that the reason that Yeshua is called Mashiach is because Yahuwah anointed him with oil that was taken from the wood of the tree of life, and that he himself also will anoint with similar oil every one of the obedient when they come to his kingdom. So in this respect, it's almost like you could become a type and shadow of Messiah by standing up for righteousness and justice, by keeping the Torah, and by being obedient to the Most High. So is it possible for men to be seen as the standing one in the Scriptures? And so as I went through and did another search for standing as it was related to the righteous, it says, I was kind of amazed to find numerous examples. For instance, Abraham arose early in the morning and went to the place where he had stood before Yahuwah, and he looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah. So what was Abraham doing when he was standing before Yahuwah? Well, he was intervening on behalf of the people, and he was begging for Yahuwah to spare the life of the people, to spare the life of the righteous, which in itself would have been an act of justice and righteousness. And you saw that this is mentioned as Abraham standing before Yahuwah. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout the land of Mizraim. So he's standing before Pharaoh, interpreting his dreams and taking on this responsibility of being the salvation of the people, a type and shadow of Messiah. Genesis 48, and these events came to be that was said to Joseph, see, your father is sick. And he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Yaakov was told, see, your son Joseph is coming to you. And Israel strengthened himself and sat up in the bed. Now, of course, Israel, he's on his deathbed. He's not able to stand any longer physically. So the scripture almost makes an accommodation for that, where instead of standing, he strengthens himself and sits up in order to bless his sons. Exodus chapter 2, the priest of Midian has 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and they filled the trough with the water of their father's flock, but the shepherds came and drove them away. Then Moshe, he stood up and came to their rescue and watered the flock. So Moses himself is assisting these women, the daughters of the priest of Midian, and removing their oppressors. He is chasing away the oppressors, and he's giving relief to the oppressed. That's another type and shadow of this concept. After the golden calf, Moshe stood in the entrance to the camp and said, who is for Yahuwah, come to me? And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves to him and went out to fight against those that had rebelled against Yahuwah. After the sin of Korah, Aharon took the censer as Moshe commanded, ran into the midst of the assembly and saw that the plague had begun among the people, and he laid on the incense and made atonement for the people and stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. So Aharon brought salvation to the camp by standing between the dead and the living. Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aharon the priest, when he saw this sin of Israel in the camp, he stood up from among the congregation, took a spear in his hand, and went in after the man of Israel and into the tent, and thrust both of them through. And the man of Israel and the woman through her belly, thus the plague among the children of Israel came to a stop. So again, you see this concept of standing up and performing these acts of righteousness. And also we see that in the death of James, where James is told by the scribes and Pharisees to stand on the pinnacle of the temple, and from that high position you can be clearly seen. And as James stood upon the pinnacle of the temple, they asked him about this gate of Yeshua, and he replied with a loud voice, why do you ask me concerning Yeshua, the Son of Man? He himself comes in the right hand of great power, and is about to come on the clouds of heaven. And Eusebius relates that because of James's testimony, many people in the crowd believed, and then the scribes and Pharisees ended up murdering him because of that. Likewise, we see Yeshua, the true prophet, the Messiah of Israel, mentioned several times as standing. A couple of examples, John chapter 7, on the last day, the great day of the festival, Yeshua stood up and cried out and said, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me. And anyone who believes in me, let him drink. And many of the crowd, when they heard the word, they said, this truly is the prophet, the true prophet. Others said, this is the Messiah. But others said, does the Messiah come out of Galilee? And they began to question him. Also, Acts chapter 7, but Stephen, being filled with the set-apart spirit, looked steadily into heaven and saw the esteem of Yahuwah and Yeshua standing at the right hand of Elohim, and said, look, see, the heavens are open, and the son of Adam is standing at the right hand of Elohim. So again, I believe that this doctrine of the standing one is not just a concept that relates back to the Messiah, but it also relates back to this angel of Yahuwah, to acts in general performing righteousness and justice, and that it is actually a lost name of the Messiah that we can see some evidence of in Scripture. So, thank you, and that's my message for today.